Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sarah Kuro Interviews, which Hugh and I have been discussing should be called Sarah's Favourite People because I introduce every single person as one of my favourite people ever. So here's another one of my favourite people, composer, lefty good guy lawyer, Hugh Crosthwaite. Hi.
Hi, Sarah.
Now, I'm a lot interested in what you do for your day job because I can't imagine it because my whole experience with you has been you're a composer. But apparently you've got this day job. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that first?
Yeah, most of the time during the day, I'm a solicitor. I work at a firm called Morris Blackburn Lawyers, which is a firm in the city. I work for employees a lot of the time. I work for unions. I do some work for people who might have suffered some discrimination, maybe things not going so well at work, all that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so the evil lawyers would think you were the evil lawyer because you're protecting the rights of the underdog and all of that, right?
Well, I wouldn't say that any of the lawyers are evil lawyers. We're all just doing our job, but everyone's entitled to get representation. That's a central founding premise of our justice system, that everyone's allowed to go off and have their lawyer advocate for them as thoroughly as possible.
Yes, this comes up a lot in cop shows and stuff like that. Because as I said before, I don't know anything about what you really do. But as you say, everyone's entitled to representation. Just like in the medical community, they feel they have to. They're taught that they have to treat everybody equally, no matter what. So I'm sorry, I forgot that. There's no such thing as an evil lawyer. Agreed.
No, there are no evil lawyers. I mean, like, history has had some evil lawyers. I think that historically there have been plenty of evil lawyers, but as a general rule, everyone is just sort of doing their job for their client in the way that anyone would want their lawyer to act for them. You know, you go to see a lawyer and you want their undivided loyalty, and
Yeah,
that's what
of
you
course.
do.
Yeah. And is it a coincidence that you found yourself in this kind of soliciting?
Um, the like Probably not. I mean, it's the job of the lawyer. You're either a barrister or you're a solicitor. There are a great many more solicitors than there are barristers, and we're the first port of call for people when they have an issue that they need to deal with. So we take an inquiry, and if something needs to be litigated, if it needs to go to court, then it's up to us to, with the instructions of our client, of course, brief a barrister to go and do that part of the work. Yeah,
And do
so
you do things like copyright law? Are you all over that sort of thing? So if I had a bit of an issue with something like if I'd written some music and someone stole it, is that you? Can you do that?
no,
Oh,
that's not really my area. But I'm sure I'd be able to find someone that was more than capable of helping you out, assuming that this is in fact a hypothetical.
yeah, it's sort of half 50-50 hypothetical to real. We'll talk about this off camera. Okay, so how did you fall into music? Were you parallel music to law, or how did that happen for you?
Um, I did my music degree first. So I studied music straight out of school, and then I studied law after that. So I like to think of myself as a person that has sort of two lives. One of them is the law, and one of them is music. And neither is more important than the other.
Yeah, that is the sense that I get from you, except I've never seen you in a suit. I think I saw you once at Jazz Lab in a suit because you'd come straight from work. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, interesting new look. It's like, oh no, wait, he's a lawyer. So, how's the
There's lots of cool
music?
musicians that wear suits as well, of course. Maybe we can, I was just looking at photographs of David Bowie from the 60s in my lunch break. I was like, oh, I wonder what David Bowie looked like in the 60s, because I've been going through a little bit of a David Bowie retrospective. And he wore some pretty cool suits. He wore some pretty outrageous clothing as well.
Well, I was going to say
Some pretty cool suits.
the musicians you've seen in a suit usually find them in the op shop, so
Yeah.
they do wear them. But yeah, they're a bit.
I once worked with this lawyer who had the most fantastic wardrobe, almost exclusively, as far as I could tell, of these beautiful 1970s wool suits that no one else wanted to wear, and he got them all from. He had this sort of mechanism, I think, where he would go to the op shop, get the suit, and then he had a tailor that just did them all for him. And he must have had more than 10 or 15 of these like fabulous brown suits. And yeah,
Oh, that
it
sounds
was a good look.
great. Oh, we should put some pictures up. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So, imagine being a composer is a bit hard in a relatively small town like Melbourne. I mean, we feel like it's big here, but actually, compared to New York or any sort of American city or European city, have you had trouble carving out a career for yourself as a composer? I mean, personally, I view you as a composer, and I've commissioned you, as you know.
Yeah.
You've contributed quite a few pieces to my book. How's it been on your journey? Because you've been doing this for quite a long time.
I would say that any job, right, any job as an artist is probably quite difficult anywhere, really. I mean, when you think about what it is that you're selling and how you build a market for that. I mean, outside of perhaps very commercial advertising type artwork, um, I would have thought it's quite difficult. It's very difficult for me to make a comparison between Melbourne and other cities, even within Australia, because I haven't really worked elsewhere. And I appreciate that there is a significant cultural component, but I don't know. I think that societies sort of historically probably have never really supported the artists as much as we would like to think they did. I remember reading in The Rest Is Noise about the New York Phil and their commissioning in the early 20th century, and apparently it was just rubbish. I'm sure it was a New York Phil that I'm thinking of here, but it was a significant American orchestra, and the author sort of had looked through the programs and determined that they commissioned almost nothing.
That's a while ago, though, right?
It is a while ago, but we kind of think of these other places overseas as being a lot better. I just wonder whether what's really happening is that you have decisions about programming and they're being made by individuals who have preferences.
Friends, they have friends.
Yeah, they perhaps have friends, all sorts of different sort of, all sorts of different influences on the decisions. And, I kind of feel like really creating a canon of local music is not often very high in the order of priorities.
No, that's right. And in terms of commercialization, to a point, that happens in the classical world too, because before COVID, the money that's spent on bringing international artists, international conductors and soloists. But this is not just particular to classical music. If you notice, if you ever watch free-to-air TV, every jingle is a rehash of a 1980s song or a 90s song or a Katy Perry song or the whole of the advertising industry. There's not a scrap of original music, and every ad that comes on, it's an opportunity. I mean, my son Oscar and I auditioned for one of those COVID stay safe ads, and we were going to get paid. I was going to get paid $5,000 and he was going to get paid $3,000. Now, can you imagine if they just skimmed a little bit of that money off the actors' feet? Please, actors, I love you. I want you to get paid 5 times as much as you do. I'm not actually saying this, but if also the local composers could be commissioned to write jingles again the way they did before the 80s and leading up to the 80s. So this happens everywhere. This mentality that only overseas things, or things that have already been written, have any value. But I really feel like you're part of that group of musicians and composers who are trying to break that. And I believe that you break it by just ignoring the fact that that's happening and just doing mainly your own thing. And I want to bring up right now, like my favorite thing that you've ever written. You just released it last year, didn't you? The Lullabies. Yeah, 12 lullabies played by Stefan Cassomenos.
think it was 16.
He was 16.
No, it was 16.
Oh, 16 Lullabies. Sorry, yep. Tell us a little bit about why you wrote that album, and then I want to tell everybody watching this what it did to me. Go.
Okay, so the 16 Lullabies started as 5 lullabies. In 2019, I did a project with your fabulous sister, and I needed to raise money to do that, so I ran a Possible campaign, and one of the awards on Possible that I volunteered was that I would write a short piece of music. You could pay me $100 and I'd write you a piece of music. You could give it to someone as a gift, whatever you liked.
Beautiful.
And it turned out that all the people that chose that wanted me to write music for children that had either just been born or that were going to get born. And so I had 5 lullabies. And then COVID sort of hit, and I thought to myself, well, I'm lucky. I've got a pretty secure job, but I've got lots of friends who don't. Maybe I'll just try and put together a little project that can put a little bit of money in the pocket of people that I sort of care about. And Stefan was an obvious choice. And Miles and Ali were obvious choices as well. So I then went out and decided to build on what I'd done earlier and essentially commission short lullabies from people, and again ran a little project so that I could afford to quite quickly produce an album's worth of material, record it quite quickly, pay people to do their job and put it out. That was the idea. And we applied for funding to the City of Melbourne, but we were unsuccessful, which I was a little bit surprised about because of Stefan's position within the musical community. But you take the good with the bad, and then we looked to some other individuals who shared the same sort of views as I do about supporting the arts. And we were able to raise the money to do the project that way. And because they were lullabies, I could just write them, in an evening, on the weekend. The short piano works. Yep. They don't take a long time to put together. So it sort of ticked all of those boxes. And the great thing about it was that all of these people who had heard the 5 lullabies, but had not had a lullaby themselves for their kids or for whoever it was, sort of put their hand up and said, yes, I want to support this. I also would very much like a lullaby for my kids, so I would write them, and I ended up with this album of music that is written for all of these tiny people that I will get to see grow up. And you know what I mean?
This is divine. This is the equivalent of gifting someone a bottle of Dom Perignon or something when they're born, and then they get to open it when they're 21, except that they'll drink it and it'll be a waste. But here's a CD, one piece is devoted to them as humans. Yeah. It's so beautiful. And you remind me so much of me. It's like, this is why I like you. You've got this dual personality. It's like you're a creative person. You need funding to do things. On the other hand, you make money and you put it into supporting other people, making projects happen where there are no projects like that happening. So you ever confused about who you are? Like on the one hand, you need funding. On the other hand, you fund it yourself. And I just love that about you.
Well, I'm never particularly confused. I just, where there's a will, there's a way. And if you were to wait for other people to fund all your projects,
exactly,
you just wouldn't do very much.
You're so right about that. Money's everywhere. Look, I know that's a stupid thing to say after COVID, but if you're focused enough and if your project is real enough and has been distilled enough, then Possible campaigns, Kickstarter, all those crowdfunding. There's Arts Match. What's that? Match funding.
Match
what's it called?
all that sort of stuff.
And don't be disheartened, because everyone gets knocked back every now and again. This has become a little bit of a theme for me.
Even most of the time.
Yeah, most of the time, most kinds of people get knocked back. Like currently we're told that we're going to get knocked back if we're in a minority. But obviously you are part of the cis, white, male, entitled sort of group of people who get everything handed to them. But I mean, has that always been your experience? I mean, I imagine that you're just like everyone else and has been knocked back. What do you say to all that?
Well, okay, I've got two things to say to that. The first is that, people do need to acknowledge their position in the community in a thoughtful and frank manner. If you hold a position within the community that means that you get a benefit that other people don't get, just because of who you are or who they are, then you do need to acknowledge that. And I think you need to, in acknowledging that, people ought to try and make the community fairer. I don't think there's any shame in acknowledging it. It's totally uncontroversial that certain groups in the community have massive advantage because of historical atrocities. Like that's not controversial.
Yeah.
Does that mean that you're going to get everything you want handed on a silver platter? Well, plainly not. And that's okay too. I am, Anglo-Saxon cis male, and if you sort of look at me on the surface, you might regard me as not belonging to any minority group, but the practical reality is I have a hereditary neuropathy that I inherited from my mother, that she inherited from her father. It is a chronic medical condition that has had a profound impact on my experience. It's something that some people in the community have absolutely no concern about, criticising you for or humiliating you in the street over, and that's very challenging. Do I regard myself as falling within that group of people who have no challenges because of their heritage? Well, no, I don't, and that's okay as well. Like it's all fine, but I think it's important for communities to galvanise support within the community by being open to understanding people's experiences, not necessarily what I would be grateful for and what I am grateful for from a great many people is not sort of having a judge a book by its cover type attitude. And I think that generally speaking, the people who are on the right side of history when it comes to prejudice need to do their best to crystallise consensus, because the challenges that are sought to be faced and the adversaries to those progressive challenges are very significant, and to the extent that we can avoid fighting amongst ourselves, well, hopefully we'll be able to put that energy towards fighting the people who would quite happily see the world stay an unfair place.
Absolutely. It's usually change that people are most afraid of rather than what the actual change is going to be. You just spoke so beautifully about all of that, Hugh. I want to ask you, before I start raving about this Lullabies album, does any of that sentiment make its way into your music?
I think so. I mean, music has been an important outlet for me over the years, and something that I really enjoy doing from quite an early age. Sport was sport as it is for many people in our community was not something that I enjoyed all that much or could participate in. So to the extent that my experience aligned with that sort of like stereotypical Australian male experience, like, I mean, it's just like it's just not there. And music, I think, really filled. Well, it didn't fill the gap as such. It was just something that I was much more interested in. It gave me a lot more pleasure. There's sort of no gap to fill, really. It's just like what you like doing.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I had a similar, well, not exactly comparing to your childhood, but I was about 100 kilos in grade 9. And if you're not hot as a girl in grade 9, like, it's going to be bad. So if I didn't have music, I don't know what would have happened, because I could stand behind the music stand and pride myself in the abilities that I had, and I practiced all the time. And when my hot friends were sneaking into nightclubs and kissing boys and all of that, I was practicing, and I was doing QIO concerts, and I could at least find a space where we were all sort of misfits and slight freaks, and that's music is the best for us kind of kids.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very important for people to have something like that, and a place where they feel valued, and that if you're not, and I think this is something that probably affects a great many people in our community, given how diverse it is. If you don't fit that model of what is immediately acceptable on a very superficial level, then it's very important to have places where you can go and feel accepted and feel like you're doing something valuable.
Absolutely. And
you're
music is
spending your
this.
time having a valuable life.
Yeah, that's right. And a group situation, a kind of collegial situation that doesn't involve egos. I mean, I know it technically does involve egos, but you kind of have to sacrifice that, don't you, for a group thing to come together and be greater than the sum of its parts. So your album Lullabies, and I keep pushing you back there, but honestly, when I heard that you'd done this, I immediately, look, what I do, I'm going to be honest with everybody out there. When a friend of mine releases something, I just immediately buy it. And I don't always get to listening to it straight away. It's not that. It's about giving the money to the person who's produced something which I know has cost a lot of money. So I immediately just buy it, or I join their Patreon or whatever. But for some reason, I clicked on, I'll just listen to the first track. And I clicked on the first track, and I must have been in such a horrific, stressful place in my mind, because as soon as that music started, it was as calming and healing as flotation therapy or meditation or all of those healing therapies that are not self-medication, like drugs or alcohol or partying and all that. As soon as that first track started, I lay down on the floor and I listened to the entire album, because each track wasn't like every track was the same either. Each track was different, but it was played so beautifully. It was meticulously spiritual without being cliched or anything like that. Oh yeah, here's an album of lullabies. How interesting is that going to be? No. Every track was stunning. I can't recommend this album highly enough. I'm going to put this, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to put everything down in the description, and I'm going to put a link to Hugh's website in this Facebook link. But 16 Lullabies, Hugh Crosthwaite. It is absolutely beautiful.
Thanks, Sarah.
Tell us about what you did after that.
I sort of I reinstated myself in the fetal position from July through till November, as many Melburnians did, and I think that after that, I was, towards the end of the lockdown, I was very ready to do some more music. And this wonderful opportunity to work with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and
Yes.
as a part of Sydney Festival emerged, and
Amazing.
we had a concert um, in early January on the 12th and 13th of January. We recombobulated the Four Seasons in a way that was a direct reflection of some climate science. So we took Vivaldi's version of Summer, and I worked with a fellow called Tim Devine, who's an artist and the executive creative director of a firm called AKQA. And there's a wonderful website that AKQA has put up that people can have a look at and see what it is that we did. And I worked with him to create an algorithmic version of the Four Seasons that reflected what the future will look like in Sydney in 2050 if we don't do anything about
Oh
climate
my
change.
God.
So that was a pretty fun project. And that was performed as a part of the Sydney Festival in early January. So that was a real thrill and a lovely way to sort of round out that otherwise horrific year.
Oh my goodness. And can we see that anywhere? Is that link still up or not? Maybe it's just
Um,
a one-off.
it was just one off, but stay tuned.
Okay, great. Excellent. Oh, anything this guy writes, people, just fantastically beautiful. We've done what, two string quartets together?
Yeah, two string
You've
quartets,
written
a bunch of solos.
four solo violin pieces for me for electric, acoustic, and semi-acoustic. Thank you very much.
Yep.
What else? What else can we talk about? What do you see as? Is it different in Melbourne now? Is it easier to get your stuff put on now?
Um, I think it's. Uh, I feel like if you just sort of do the work, if you just commit to doing the work and trying to be productive as much as you can, eventually it does get easier. I feel that if people are really committed to their art and they pursue it, then each time it does become a bit easier. It's a bit like breakups. Each time someone breaks
Yeah,
up,
that's so cynical. Um,
that's a little bit less. But no, in all seriousness, it's a practice. It's like anything. Um,
yeah, I
the,
want to talk to you about what you did for the album this time. You might have done this before, just correct
mm,
me if I'm wrong, but one of the things you did for this album, okay, one of the gripes I have with people who whinge that no one came to their concert
mm,
is that they didn't tell anyone. And
yeah,
if they did, they only told them once. They didn't really get
yeah,
right up in their face and say, come to my concert, here's a flyer, and I'm going to email you, and
yeah,
there's a Facebook event. If you don't do all of those things, it doesn't matter what you write, no one knows it's on. Plus, you're competing in a town, because Melbourne is the
yeah,
town where there are so many concerts on and
yeah,
not a huge audience base. So that's sort of what I love about Melbourne. There's so many incredible people doing incredible things, and you go to their concert, it's the best thing you've ever seen in your life, and there's maybe 10 people there because everyone's gone to Melbourne Recital Centre to see Get On Kramer or something, you know.
yeah.
So the thing that you did, which I admired, and I felt, I should maybe do that sometimes if I have the spare money. You got a publicist, and I want to do a shout out to Ali Webb because she's a fantastic girl and she did a great job for you, didn't she? Let's talk about what the publicist did for you that you couldn't have managed by yourself.
Like her, like if if she gets up in the morning and calls someone, she's done something that I couldn't do by myself. If she sends out an email, she's done something that I couldn't do by myself. I think that when people are budgeting projects, it is very important these days to budget for publicity. Um, I don't think that you can do it properly unless you have that help.
Yeah, absolutely.
A good publicist is a professional person whose craft is finding the thing that is special about what it is that you've done. And if you put your heart and soul into something, there's always something special about it.
Yeah.
Finding that thing and putting it in the best position to be understood and received by other people, so that you can share what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and Ali Webb was a perfect choice because she worked with the MSO for a long time, so she totally understands what it is to be a classical musician, but she doesn't kid herself about classical music. She doesn't think that it's just a rose falling from the sky in slow motion next to a glass of champagne. She doesn't trivialize it like that. She doesn't do that. She understands the dirt, the grit, the emotion, the intensity, because she's got to know the players. She hasn't just flitted around with the admin. She's got nothing against our admin. Love you guys. But she has got down and dirty with the players, and so she knows how real and raw it is to be a performing musician, concert after concert after concert. She knows composers, and now she knows you. So every time she does a project for someone like you, she even gets better and better at what she does. So highly recommend Ali Webb, guys. Don't whinge that no one's coming to your concert. Get a few $100, hand it over to her. She's probably more than that, but anyway, I'm telling you, you can't complain if you haven't done everything as much as you possibly can, and that includes a publicist.
Well, I think that's right. And there's there's a point about building, which is very important when I think for people who are starting out, particularly. I mean, there'll be plenty of people who Sarah, who maybe watch these interviews, and this will be like telling them how to paint by colours, paint by numbers, sorry. But for a lot of people who are starting out, they resist the idea of this being an important part of their artwork. But if you've got aspirations and you've got a career, a goal that you want to achieve, then I would recommend just, taking some of the funding that you've got available to you, taking some of the resources, just doing whatever it is, even if you have no money, just taking some of the time that you dedicate to a project, to that sort of publicity activity. It's not creative, really. Like, that's fine. It's not writing music, that's okay. But it will assist you to build a reputation. And every time you build, you're just making that goal of having a career, like a full-time career as an artistic person, more likely.
Yeah, absolutely. And being an Australian, it's very weird, the phenomenon of low self-esteem. I find that people who do concerts that I've loved, and I don't see their ads for their chamber concert, I don't see anything anywhere, and then I go to the concert, there's not enough people there, I can't understand it, and I really harass them about it. I'm like, why didn't you let me know? I had to hear about this from that vague source over there. Why? They're shy. They don't want to get in people's faces and say, I'm doing this amazing thing. You've got to have pride in what you do. And you've got to tell people about it, because people want to support. That's the great thing about Melbourne audiences too. They do want to see what you're doing. Yeah.
And you've got to find a way that's good for you, that works for you. I think if you hop on, say you use Instagram, and you look at the artists that you like and the way that they post about things, people do things differently. There's not one method. There's, not everyone has to do things the way that, say, like a pop artist would do it, with like very frequent posting about, if you don't want to let people into your personal life, you don't have to, so you just think about the tool, and try and find a way to, I got a message come through. Ding.
It's there forever.
It's there forever. Just think about the way that you can get your message out that aligns with your values, and just be driven by that. I think that's probably the best way. And if that means that you do a bit less than someone else, like, that's fine. Just don't do nothing.
Yeah, don't do nothing. Don't do nothing and then complain that no one goes. They want to go. They want to see what you're doing. They definitely do. All right, Hugh Crosthwaite, 16 Lullabies for piano. Stefan Cassomenos, the pianist. This is a stunning album. I want everyone to buy it instantly. Just go now. Go and get it. It's absolutely stunning. Hugh, thank you so much for talking to me. Just love what you do, and I'm so happy that you've been in my life for over a decade.
Yeah, I'm very happy that you've been in my life for over a decade too, Sarah. Thanks.
We're a good team.
Inviting me to have a chat.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.